I showed you earlier in this chapter how to make different graphics for different rollover states by applying pre-built styles from Photoshop's Styles panel. But that's not the only way to make rollover graphics in Photoshop. Alternatively, you can put different pieces of artwork on different layers and then manipulate the visibility of layers and layer effects as you change rollover states. In this lesson, I'll use different artwork to create graphics for 3 states of each of the buttons in this navigation bar. The normal state will look like this, with outlined buttons. The overstate, triggered when a viewer hovers her mouse over a button, will look like this. The buttons will turn aqua. And I'll also make a downstate that will be triggered when a viewer presses down on a button, in which the buttons will be aqua but will look like they're pushed in. I've started by creating 2 layer groups of artwork. The outline buttons that you see here are in the first layer group, the one labeled outline buttons. I'll expand that group so you can see that it contains 4 layers, each with a separate button. So that you can see what's on the Services Outlined layer, for example, I'll click the eye icon to the left of that layer so you get a sense of what's on the Services Outlined layer. And I'll turn the Specials Outlined layer on and off too, so you get a sense of that button and the Locations Outlined layer and so on. So this is the way that I would like the navigation bar to look on the normal state. To memorialize this in a layer comp, I'm going to go down to the Layer Comps panel, and if yours isn't open, you can open it from the window menu at the top of the screen. I'm going to create a new layer comp by clicking the New Layer Comp button. I'll name the new layer comp Normal for the normal state of the rollovers, and I'm going to leave all 3 of these properties checked, although I'm most interested in the visibility property because that's what I'm using to vary the artwork across states of the rollovers. I'll click OK, and I now have my first layer comp, the normal layer comp. Next, I'm going to set up the appearance of the overstate of each button. In the Layers panel, I'll go to the Outline Buttons layer group and I'll click its arrow to collapse that layer group, and then I'm going to turn the entire layer group off, make it invisible, by clicking the eye icon next to the Outline Buttons layer group. Instead, I'm going to click the eye icon to the right of the Aqua Buttons layer group, and that makes all of the buttons in that layer group visible. I'll click the arrow to the left of the Aqua Buttons layer group so you can see all 4 of those layers. And so that you get a sense of the content of each layer, I'll turn its eye icon off and then on, off and on, off and on. So this is the way I want each button to look in its overstate when a viewer hovers over the button. I'll memorialize that in the Layer Comps panel by creating another layer comp. I'll click the Create New Layer Comp button. I'll call this layer comp Over for the overstate, and I'll leave all of the properties, particularly visibility, checked, and click OK. Now, if I cycle through my 2 layer comps, clicking in the field to the left of each layer comp, this is how the buttons will look in their normal state, and this is how they'll look in their overstate. But that's not all. I want to make one more state for each button, a down state that will be triggered when a viewer presses on a button in a web browser. In the down state, I'd like each button to remain aqua-colored, but also look pushed in. So to do that, I'm going to use an inner shadow layer effect. I'll start with the Services Aqua button, which is this button that I'm turning off and on for you. I'll select that layer in the Layers panel, and then I'll go down to the FX icon at the bottom of the Layers panel, and from there I'll choose Inner Shadow. That applies a default inner shadow to that button and opens the Layer Style dialog box. With the inner shadow style selected in the Styles column on the left, I can customize the options for that style. For example, I might tweak the distance, the choke, and even the size of that inner shadow. In CS5, I can make these particular settings the default for this layer style by clicking the Make Default button and then clicking OK. I'd like to have the same effect on the other buttons for the down state of the rollover. There are several ways I can do that. One way would be to go to another button layer, double-click it to open its Layer Style dialog box, and click the checkbox next to Inner Shadow. If I select Inner Shadow, I can see that I have the same settings that I'd made as the default for this layer style just a moment ago. You can see that I have the same effect on the Specials button that I do on the Services button, and I'll click OK. Another way to get that effect on the other buttons is just to copy it. To do that, I'm going to scroll down a bit, and then I'm going to hold down the Option key on the Mac, that's the Alt key on Windows, and I'll click and drag from the Inner Shadow effect on the Specials Aqua layer down to the Locations Aqua layer, and release my mouse to copy that same effect to the Locations Aqua layer, and you can see it here now on the Locations button. And there's one more way to copy that effect to the 4th button, and that is to select the Locations Aqua layer and then Control-click on a Mac or right-click on a PC on the FX icon on that layer and choose Copy Layer Style. Then I'll click on the About Aqua layer, which contains this About Us button, and I'll Control or right-click there and choose Paste Layer Style. No matter which method I use, I get the same inner shadow layer style on each of the buttons. This is how I'd like the buttons to look in the down state. And to get Photoshop to remember their appearance for that state, I'll create a third layer comp by going to the bottom of the Layer Comps panel and clicking the Create New Layer Comp button. I'll call this one Down, and I'll leave all the properties checked. In this case, I'm most interested in the Appearance property because for this state, I've varied the layer style. I'll click OK, and now I have 3 layer comps. I can cycle through those layer comps by clicking the arrows at the bottom of the Layer Comps panel. There's the way the buttons will appear on the normal state, on the over state, and on the down state. So those are a couple more ways that you can create rollover artwork in Photoshop by varying the visibility of layers and by applying individual layer effects. At this point, I would normally go through all the steps that I've described in detail in previous movies in this chapter. I would slice up these buttons, I would name the slices, I would optimize the button slices for the web, and then I would run the lynda.com Layer Comps to Slices script that we provided for you to export out all of the rollover graphics for all of the states for all of these buttons all at once.